On today's show, we're going to talk about communications in this new environment because everything's the same, but not. I have a special guest on today, Mr. Phil Derner, media expert, industry veteran, knows all things communications and industry topics. So excited to have him on. Other than that, ready to have you guys today, and we'll get started with our intro video. Doug, good morning.
Morning, how's it going?
It's good. I'm excited for our guest today. I'm kind of upset because I gotta preface this. So Phil Derner, everybody knows Phil at events. He's always suited and booted, beautiful, glorious, shiny bald head, and I thought he was gonna come on today and be that, and it's Phil in a hat. And I was like, man, I'm really, really missing this look. And it's funny because a couple weeks ago, Phil shared a picture on his social media when he was younger and actually had hair. And he looked like McLovin. He really looked like McLovin. I'm going to have to put that in the comment section. But I'm really excited to have Phil on today because I had mentioned at the top of the show, Phil is a communications expert, industry veteran, kind of knows how to navigate the waters. Everything is done. We'll let him fill everybody in on their bio because I certainly can't do it justice. But before we get rolling, though, Doug, anything new on your end?
No, I'm glad to see you back home. It's been quite the road trip there.
Yeah, I've been on the road pretty consistently the last several weeks. So there's been some intermittent frequency with our recordings. I got to figure out how to bring this on the road with the same studio quality.
You know, it's funny how much things are starting to get back to normal, but the whole theme of today's show of everything's the same but different, I think is something everyone's trying to figure out, like, how do we just keep this ball rolling? So I'm pretty excited to talk to Phil today and get his perspective.
Yeah, well, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring Phil on. Let's pull him in there, and boom. Phil, good morning. How are you? You're not in the Pacific Northwest. You're just in California.
Yeah, Southern California.
Southern California. Did the wildfires affect you all that much out there?
Not directly. I mean, where I live, I'm not really in danger from it. I'm out in the desert. Not much to burn in my immediate area, but the smoke, when there are fires, smoke covers the skies, and I get ash on my car. It looks like a snow dusting. As an airplane nerd, I love seeing the firefighting aircraft. I just wish I didn't need to see them, but it's totally different from New York City where I grew up.
Oh man. Well, we're excited to have you here today because as you know, the premise of this show, we talk all things sales and marketing. This is really born out of COVID because it wasn't CEOs, it wasn't CTOs, it wasn't marketing leaders that were leading digital transformations within organizations. It was COVID-19. And I don't know how many people truly want to admit that, but by and large, I mean, across the board, every industry, every sector, and particularly ours, COVID-19 has forced adaptation of this new digital landscape that we're living in because, I had mentioned in our talks before that, the majority of our industry was face-to-face. It was outside sales. It's going to meet customers. It's doing demo flights. It's being out there. And I'm not saying a lot of that stuff still doesn't go on today, but from your position where you're at in the industry, I mean, obviously events was a huge thing, being out there, having displays, having booths, that was part of the outside sales thing to get leads and fill the pipeline and all those good things that businesses thrive on. And we don't really know when they're really going to return. I mean, we're trying to forecast that, but then we really don't even know what that's going to look like. So organizations and businesses can't continue to sit back and wait for outside sales to happen. A lot of those sales are now inside sales. And I figured with your background, I mean, can you fill us a little bit in on what your background is and then maybe start talking about how you've seen kind of the industry change over the last 6-7 months?
Sure. And thank you. I'm glad to be here. Really appreciate the invite to have this discussion with you guys. I've kind of had two separate careers going on at once for a long time until the last couple of years. I worked in aviation operations for a long time. Back around 2005, I got a job working for a military charter company as a loadmaster. Uh, Flew around the world, saw a bunch of countries, and got into dispatch and eventually into management of aviation operations.
Mm-hmm.
Going on until I started working for NBAA as the Western Regional Representative, working in doing everything, wearing kind of every hat, no pun, that NBA does out in my area. Back in 2003, I also started a website, which ended up being a news media consulting organization. So writing content, discussing aviation news, and working as an on-air analyst for national news networks and some aviation-related documentaries, usually accident-related documentaries as well, helping them build content and appearing to discuss and things like that. So I gave that up a couple of years ago, and I've gotten to this here in this crazy time. I don't think anyone really would have expected a disease or a virus to really have the effect that it has. I think people have always been people think that we're somewhat invincible to an extent. Things might affect us, but not really knock us down. And we've seen, I mean, it's not that we've seen everything change. I mean, everything has changed. Everything has gone upside down in the last 7 months. And it's survival of the fittest. And it's not about, fit doesn't mean push-ups. It means the ability to adapt.
Yeah.
And who's ready to adapt to what we're seeing these days?
Yeah. So like when with this adaptation, and Doug and I mentioned this like in an early on show about kind of this battlefield mentality, because business, again, you can't ever just rest on your laurels. You can't stay put. And in times of crisis or any time, you're trying to advance a business, there's this battlefield kind of analogy that we talk about. And, you fall into one of three categories. You either, freeze in the face of adversity, you turn in your retreat, or you adapt, move, and communicate, and you overcome. And, with marketing, a lot of people, with marketing and sales and everything, a lot of people kind of recant it, because like the first thing to go in budgets usually is your marketing budgets. And we know that marketing is today kind of ambiguous too, because it's PR, it's sales, it's HR, it's everything that embodies, I think, the summary of your brand. And in particular, again, with today's digital world, I mean, your online presence, you can't have a drop off in continuity from your online presence to your in-person type thing with events. And so with that whole adapting and, who's going to adapt and overcome, we've seen some people slowly kind of hesitate to jump into the digital realm. Some people kind of went head first with things. What have you seen, like, by and large as a whole, as NBA has done more digital events now? I mean, because you're obviously trying to stay ahead of the power curve, or stay ahead of the airplane, if you want to talk aviation lingo, that we're trying to meet and stay up with the current demand of things. What are you seeing from your end, maybe from just your media analysis hat and then knowing the industry? What's your take on that?
I see people, organizations and companies stepping up. I don't think anything that is taking place these days is new. I mean, Zoom existed before this. The camera, the Logitech 920, my Blue Yeti, these things existed before. None of this is new. It's just that everyone was forced to start using them, and they didn't quite expect that. We look at NBAA and what we're doing. It's constant virtual events, virtual webinars. I've been working with on the NBA NewsHour webinar as one of the two producers. It's doing the same things that we're doing and just plugging it into a different hole. And I think the value for the marketing, you say that marketing budget's the first thing to go. When we're all trapped inside, all we have is marketing and outward communication. I don't think there's been a more important time to really invest in marketing and PR and any form of communication, because that's all that we have. I know for me, I mean, I'm usually on the road more than half the time in 7 states that I work in. And I've left my town once in the last 7 months. As an individual, as an extrovert, that's difficult on me. But even just in the work that we do, we haven't sat still and we're still delivering the same value to people. We're delivering a lot of messages, not just helping people cope with COVID, but also making sure that we don't fall into complacency with regular aviation safety, for example. I mean, all of the things that we always needed to do still need doing. We can still do them in the digital environment, and we've got to cope with the new challenges of COVID. So I think the workload is kind of doubled, and outward communication is key. That's why this, I mean, Skype, Zoom, social media, all of this stuff is that much more important now, because it doesn't matter what I do in this room, no one knows about it unless I'm plugged in.
Yeah.
With your background in doing some of those documentaries and learning the art of storytelling, what are some of the big lessons you've learned that have now helped carry forward and are things that some brands should understand when it comes to telling their brand story?
I think scalability is a biggie, and it's the reason, like, we're having a pretty casual conversation right now. So I choose polo shirt and a hat. You're talking a little bit more to Phil Derner a bit. So cool, this is a little bit more Phil Derner. If I'm with a different audience, hey, maybe I'm going to go for the tie even while I'm at home. Changing the message and having a scalable message for different applications, I think, is key, because what I would say while I'm on the Fox and Friends couch about a topic might be different from what I'm saying to a local news station when they've got a camera on and I'm with them on the sidewalk, versus a documentary versus what I'm writing for a newspaper. It's all a different message. It's all a different format. And now we just have different applications of social media, Instagram Live, Facebook Live, Zoom calls, Zoom conferences, webinars. All of these are different things. So it's much the same. We're just using some different packages for whatever our message is. So I think message packaging is key.
Now, you've done a lot of reps and sets. Like, you've been on different stages, you've gotten ready. Like, for most of these businesses, launching into live videos or getting started, like, those are things that just seem like the most impossible task. How would you coach somebody just to get into it? And, like, what are the steps you get ready to prep if you're getting on video? And Chris, you too, because, like, I mean, the amount of ability and the quality of the videos you guys produce, like, is off the charts.
I think, just as you say, it's reps. I mean, so many people don't practice how to speak in front of a camera. And I do two big things in my own time. I mean, I still do it. I don't spend I don't spend time in front of a camera and with the news or anything like that these days. I respond to media inquiries and so forth, but I'm still practicing this stuff. I'm talking to myself while I drive. What questions could I be asked? And I practice it out loud, talking to myself while I drive. And if I can't do that with comfort and ease, then I've got to work on something, and I got to keep getting those reps in. I have a friend, we do a communication drill every single day. He interviews me every single day by phone about aviation related topics that I send his way. And I find out what my flaws are, my breathing, my use of jargon, all these little things that I find challenging. I mean, you got to get the reps in. You can't have practice. Imagine a pro hockey player only practicing in the game and not having other practice outside of the game. That's exactly what it is. So you got to get the reps in, just do it.
I love that he picked hockey, by the way.
Doug's Canadian, so like it's pretty. They're born like on skates and with a stick and puck. So
I grew up playing it.
That's awesome.
No, that's a good point, Phil. I mean, it's getting the reps in, but also too, I think. Again, we spend so much time at events and talking to people. I mean, I think the majority of people in our industry are kind of extroverts, or they enjoy, that face-to-face type conversation. And I think when they see a camera or they see a lens or they see the red light pop on, they kind of freeze because it's not native to them. It's not normal to them. But also just realize you're still talking to one person. Yes, it's one to many, but focus on talking one-to-one. You're speaking to your ideal prospect. You're speaking to your ideal customer. You're speaking to your ideal audience because, you're getting the questions fed to you. Or, if you're putting out a marketing communications campaign, who you're trying to reach. Just imagine speaking to that one person and you feel much more comfortable and you don't think that you have hundreds of thousands of eyes potentially looking at you. Just view it as that. I mean, that's my big thing is, get comfortable with speaking to people. And I think if you're in sales at all, I mean, you have to be comfortable cold calling, picking up the phone, talking to somebody. I mean, all that makes people nervous. This is just another medium to be able to do that. And this happens also be, with video. This also happens to be the way that people can still connect with you and learn. Phil had mentioned, like, this is how you get to learn who Phil Derner is. This is how you get to learn who Chris Kiocho is. I mean, this you can see the body language. You can hear vocal enunciations and tonage. I mean, there's so much more personal connection through this, I believe, when it's done real and authentically, than a canned script. Let me read up here like a robot and just lock in and stare at a camera. That's kind of my take on all this.
Yeah, I think the psychology of it is exactly that. If I'm face to face, I'm talking to you, I'm reading your body language, I'm looking at your eyebrows, how your every muscle that's in your face. I can speak based on the reaction I'm getting from you. And you can't do that with a camera. You can't have a connection or chemistry with a camera. So you literally have to, continue to remind yourself, who am I speaking to? Who is my audience? And envision, like, my tone and the way that I'm going to converse with someone is based on, at least to a camera or to a large audience, who's that one person? Who's the true audience? And remember that, because you can feed off of that when you're looking at a camera or even a large crowd. It can be difficult. You've got to pay attention to the faces sometimes and follow their lead. That's what conversation is about with other human beings, is about that connection. And it's very difficult to do that in this environment. And that's why if you're recording a podcast, I like to record a podcast on Zoom because I want to see the face. I'm not going to use the video, but I'm feeding off the person. We're having that conversation like that. So the lack or challenges of interpersonal connection these days is a challenge. And putting out the digital content is great, but then how do we replicate the social engagement, the networking, truly the networking, So I think the Zoom happy hours, scheduling a Zoom beer with a buddy or something like that is good, just for mental health, just to keep it together at the end of the week. Again, these are the time what we need to adapt to these days.
Well, and I think you actually meant during. Go ahead, Chris.
No, go. Well, I was just going to say, like, it's just interesting when you talked about, like, the networking, and we very much talk about the industry as like a community. And Doug and I had talked about, when you put out said content, right? Like, you want to cultivate this community. You want to create an owned audience, because you're not just doing it, for goodwill. Again, these are businesses, these are entities that need to survive. They need to thrive. I mean, they have shareholders, they have, principals that are responsible for the stuff, small, large, medium business, enterprise businesses. I mean, you all have to generate sales and continue to try and grow the business. And we talked about the psychology of selling. You kind of alluded to it, Phil, is that, people want to feel a part of something, right? People are attracted to brands that make them feel like they're a part of something bigger than just, oh, hey, hi, we fly this high, this far, this fast. Look at our airplane. I mean, I feel like most of the stuff we try and sell is just, it's pure sex appeal, because obviously what's not sexy about a private jet or a private aircraft? But there's so much more to it than a spec sheet. And I think a lot of the stuff that we see out there is, they try to paint this picture of grandeur and look how far and fast we can fly, which is fine. But I still think it falls short of, again, like, creating a community and something that you're bigger than yourself. And I know sustainability is a big piece of it. But going back to your point, I'm sorry I got long-winded there. When you put stuff out in communications, again, your whole goal is, again, to create and cultivate a community, an audience, and that you own it, and you're not really so dependent on all these channels, because you want to put said content out, yes, but obviously come back to your website or something else that you want to do to further the communication. You're not just putting out, billboards in a sense, or just posts to post. You want to have some sort of action to drive, a conversation further or deeper. Sorry, that was just my 2 cents. I went off there on a tangent, Doug.
Oh, no worries. You brought up a point I was going to go down anyways, was with the importance of building an audience. And Phil, being that you have that background and so much exposure with the news media, one of the things I really wanted to get your opinion on is the importance of having an opinion and being able to speak to an audience. I find so many brands these days, they're afraid to have an opinion because, well, I might upset this person or this person. What's your take on having an opinion, both as like a personal brand and as a business brand or company, and speaking to your core audience? How do you manage that?
I think it's kind of what you said. Are we looking at corporate messaging? Are we looking to build personal brand? Back when I was working on my old company, people were seeing my face. They were seeing Phil Derner at the bottom of the screen. And while I'm trying to promote my business at the same time, I have an obligation to sculpt my personal brand as well through that. So, and kind of blend the two together. I think having an opinion, everyone's got one. There's a phrase that I won't say, opinions are like something, everyone's got one. You need to determine if that's something that's applicable. It's a different shape item that's, can it fit into the holes that I need it to go in? You got to figure out what your goal is, because sometimes an opinion is good. Is your opinion driving forward what you want to convey? And I think these days people are so quick to share their opinions. I think sometimes people maybe overvalue their opinions when there may not be a true application for it or a benefit. So even if you want to correct someone on Twitter, and man, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, whatever it is on social media, or put something out in an email, think about what is the purpose of this? Does this serve a purpose for me to open my mouth and share my opinion on something? And when we're working with government affairs topics and legislative things, yeah, we will speak our opinion. As NBAA will speak its opinion because the position matters and is driving forward a specific goal. I think just speaking to speak is, when it comes to messaging and communications, I think it needs to be intentional, and you really need to know why you're doing that.
You brought up, like, that's a huge point, which I always bring up with brands when it comes down to frequency and quality. I hate to see them just produce content for the sake of content versus taking their time and producing something meaningful. How does a company balance that?
Well, I think some of the mission, I mean, why do you want to draw people? I mean, these days we look at Instagram influencers who are they influencing and what are they influencing them for? And then they get a sponsor and they're sponsoring an energy drink or something like that. And it's like, so that person has 500,000 followers. Are those followers really going to get an energy drink for the same reason that they're following said person? For example, you got to understand what it's doing. Does my opinion that I'm sharing or content that I'm putting up build my credibility? Is it going to help people trust me to bring in sales? Is it going to improve my reputation for me to get more work or get more phone calls? And for me, what I was doing, I would post aviation content on social media, and if it was good enough and showed, hey, maybe this guy Phil knows what he's talking about, then I get a call from a CNN producer and says, hey, Phil, that was great. Can you come talk to me about this? That's what that is. It's got to serve a purpose. And if you're just looking to entertain, if that's the kind of audience you want to build, and that's what the business that you're in, great. If you want to build credibility for yourself, your social media, for example, is a perpetual resume. You should be able to scroll down someone's Twitter feed or Facebook and just know exactly what they're all about. This person is continuously hitting the nail on the head. So before you post, is my content accomplishing that?
How did you preserve the authenticity? Like, it's so easy to try to game the system or try to follow this recent hack, but based on like your track record, what you produce, like, it was genuine, it was authentic. How did you balance that and not get sucked into any of those tricks or hacks?
Profanity. Sometimes, and I joke, but I think there's some value in showing that you're a human. Cracking a joke, just stepping outside of what isn't the structure. If my message seems too processed, no one wants to follow a robot. Hey, this information's good, but do we want to have a conversation with this person in front of a camera, for example? Uh, you can't be too polished. I want people to see that if you want people to relate to your message, you need to be a relatable person that's conveying that message. So uh, sometimes I just think that you need to be able to connect with people, and it's not so much how you write the message or prepare the message. Uh, we're all trying to connect, and people make business decisions for personal reasons, of course, and you've got to be able to build those personal relationships. Someone on the other side of their TV, their laptop, their phone that's receiving the message you're sending, they need to be able to connect and relate to you.
Yeah. And I mean, I know this sounds like a lot because again, a lot of the larger companies, enterprise level companies, they've got an internal communications team, they have an internal marketing team, and a lot of that stuff can be prepped for them. But Phil, what would you say to like your mid-size or smaller businesses that maybe don't have those resources when it comes to, this communication or trying to find help so that way they can continue again to put out their messages and continue to be heard? Because you'd mentioned early on in the show, you can sit no matter what you do in your room or your office, like it means nothing unless people know what you're doing, and that means putting yourself out there, and that just so happens to be right now through these mediums of social media and the internet. What's one piece of advice you would give to small or mid-sized businesses that are maybe struggling to get out there still in the wake of all this COVID stuff?
You asked that question in my head. I see, flexing Rosie the Riveter saying you can do it. I truly believe that. I mean, the playing field is so much more level these days with the internet. We look back 30 years, 40 years when the only news sources we had were whatever newspapers were printed locally and three TV channels. These days you can get news and information from anywhere, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. These days with the internet, you have the ability to push your message out there. So many people with personal networking, they say it's all about who you know, and they say like, oh, I'm not doing too well, it's all about who you know. It's like, that's pessimistic. It is all about who you know, and you can go out and know anyone you want. The world is out there for the taking. I think that, anyone can get this equipment. Anyone can put out their emails. Anyone can email someone. Anyone can get involved with a trade association. I get emails from companies who, hey, Phil, I want to appear on a NBA NewsHour. They want to get their name out there. They want to get their company out there. They want to be seen. You don't have to be a Fortune 50 company to be a significant player in your industry. You just continue to put yourself out there. The networking doesn't stop because we're not shaking hands in person. So I think it's out there for the taking for anyone, small, medium, large size companies. That's a big deal when you're sending out, and for details, I know you appear, we discuss video marketing and stuff on a NewsHour webinar. We were discussing putting a video in emails, instead of just reading text. Put a face to the brand, email out a video of your business owner discussing whatever the topic is. Make those announcements by videos. That it's engagement. I just think anyone can do it. And that's exactly how I built my business. I wasn't. I didn't go out and buy an office and hire 30 people or anything like that. I started off with me and a website and one or two brilliant friends. We started building this thing until we got seen, and you couldn't not hear us. You were going to know who we are because we were pushing the message and digitally shaking hands with the right people. That's how I built all of that, and it worked for me. And I think that anyone can do it.
Yeah. Well, Phil, this has been an awesome conversation. I feel like we could go on for hours about this, but I just kind of want to summarize this up is that, when it comes to your communications, your marketing, your sales, your outreach, you want to have a strategy. You want to be very deliberate. You want to be very intentional with what you're putting out. Because again, as you mentioned, Phil, just speaking up for the sake of speaking up isn't always the best thing. You got to have a strategy. And I think, Doug, we talk about this a lot, mapping out what that customer journey is. What's your audience? What do they need to hear at various points of, a sales cycle or some sort of communication cycle that you're trying to push? And then I think the best part of what you said, Phil, that my biggest takeaway is that you don't have to be a Fortune 50 company anymore. You know, like you said, where you have to have tens of millions of dollars for marketing, because the internet certainly has absolutely leveled the playing field in terms of being able to put your message in front of the right people at the right time in the right place. We're not limited to Fox, CNN, MSNBC, you know, like the main things, or the New York Times, or, you know, the big stalwarts of traditional media. The internet, you've got the ability to put your brand, your face, your message literally anywhere online in front of the right people at any time. And that just that makes me all warm and fuzzy, because that just is kind of, you know, the wheelhouse that we kind of fall in as a business. So those are my two big takeaways. Doug, what about you?
The biggest thing was all about the authenticity and like speaking to an audience, not being pre-canned or formulated, and just being genuine with the content you create.
Yeah. Well, appreciate it, Phil. Is there any parting words you wanna say to the audience? Anything you want to plug or promote?
No, you know, you can search my name and find me on social media. You know, like I said, I work for NBA now as the Western Regional Representative, and I love what I do. I work for a great organization, and I would use any NBAA or AOPA, or if you're an ABA, anyone at all, to stay engaged. Just what we're doing right now, we're staying engaged. Keep doing that and keep at it, and one day we'll be beyond this, and we'll see who was putting in the reps during this time, you know.
Oh, there we go. Well,
Perfect
thanks.
bow on.
Wait,
Reps
well,
and
Phil,
sets.
reps and sets. We'll go knock out some push-ups after this. So, well, thanks again, Phil, for joining us, and we'll see everybody next week when we come live with our next guest. See ya.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.